You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
Welcome back. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. The Texas Supreme Court has struck down the latest effort to stop the state's new abortion restrictions, so the way is clear for even more cities to jump on the sanctuary cities bandwagon. The latest, the Plainview City Council, but like in Lubbock, their council chose to put that to a vote of the people. So an ordinance banning abortions there goes on the general election ballot November 8th. And word this week that former Texas Tech President Lauro Cavazos has passed away. Cavazos served as Tech's president through the 80s until he was called to serve as the U.S. Secretary of Education. First Hispanic person ever to do both of those things, and was named the most influential Hispanic in the U.S. by Hispanic Business Magazine in 1990. Lauro Cavazos was 95. A lot of city annexations are contentious. Not everyone wants city water, garbage, whatever charges on their monthly bills. But the folks in the Highland Oaks neighborhood are a different story. They actually need an annexation to happen because they say they need more water. KAMC's Brian Chandler rejoins us with a look at their challenges.
The neighbor down the street from me, if they're taking a shower, they can't flush a toilet. This is kind of the stories out here.
And watering the lawn, often not an option. That's why the Highland Oaks neighborhood, just south of Lubbock city limits, is asking the city to take them in.
If I water my yard one time and sprinkler head's broke, I'm out of water. I gotta wait 30 minutes for water to fill it back up. So
their water wells aren't keeping up with demand. So homeowners say the city's infrastructure and services will help fill the gaps. But it's not just about convenience. They're worried about falling property values and rising risk.
If a house catches on fire out here and it catches good enough you can't control it, that house is gone. It's done. It burns to the ground, and we got plenty of stories of that. So that's our biggest driving force, is the protection of our homes out here.
But their biggest hurdle is political will. Annexation will require support from city council and a vote from neighborhood residents. The Homeowners Association worries city council may table the issue until after the May election, which could delay the process more than a year. But they say water is not something they can wait for.
If they do this, this is trouble for us. That will push us all the way back to next May of 2023. Just the fire hydrants alone and having the professionals of Lubbock Fire Department out here is just astronomical. It's just a must-do, I think.
Ryan Chandler, KAMC News.
All right, Ryan, and let's spend 5 good minutes now with one of the new candidates for Lubbock City Council for District 5, Dr. Jennifer Wilson. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Brian. Thank you for having me on the show.
That annexation would be part of District 5. Stands to cost the city, though, quite a bit of money up front to make it happen with the water lines and everything else that goes along with that. Should that happen? Can it happen?
So I think it should happen. You know, those are citizens that live right outside of our city limits, and, you know, they have chosen to build out there, but we are short on water out there, and they are in desperate need of water. You know, every year, we tend to burn down one of those big houses, and it's our fire department, you know, kind of has some mutual aid agreements where they're trying to go out, but there's no water access.
Yeah.
And so I think to help our citizens out, it'll also help, you know, the city out bringing them in. It will cost some money up front, but return on investment wise, I think they'll be good to add to our city and to District 5.
You're a pediatric physician, assistant professor here and there, wife, mom, the whole gambit. Was there an issue or a spark of some kind that led you to say, you know what, I'm going to add the city council to my list of things?
Yeah, so, you know, first, I'm not a politician, so there wasn't ever really one thing, but, you know, I think over the last couple of years, you know, surrounding the pandemic and then more locally, you know, with the decision to make Lubbock a sanctuary city, you know, I think the people, especially in my district, but in Lubbock in general, are not feeling represented by their governing body, and myself included, as a voter. And so I thought it was time. You know, the beauty of having a democracy is that if you don't like the way it's being run, you can get up and do something about it. And so that's what I've chosen to do.
Like it. Now, not a political background you mentioned, but are there ways that maybe your medical career and the things that go along with that could help you be an effective council person?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I come from a really strong family of public service and public safety. My mom was an assistant district attorney here. My stepdad was a police officer for Lubbock Police Department for 30 years. You know, my husband is a firefighter for Lubbock Fire Rescue, and so I have that public service background. Well, you know, I chose to go into medicine as a pediatric physician. You know, the great qualities of a physician is somebody who can listen to people, you know, diagnose a problem, and then find a solution to fix that problem. And I think those are the qualities of what we need in public servants and elected officials.
Yeah, you worked for a time with the city health department.
Yes.
What did you think of the city's COVID response from both a medical and a governmental standpoint?
So, I think the response to something that is unprecedented, like a global pandemic, is always going to be ever-changing. They probably, it was definitely over-politicized. It should have been probably left more to the medical professionals, and it got to where it was decisions were based on politics. I think the city did as best as they could. I think that we should not have shut our businesses down. I think that was very detrimental to small business here in Lubbock, and that it just allowed our big box stores to make a lot of money, and it really hurt our people and our economy here. Luckily, it looks like our economy is bouncing back pretty quickly, and some of our small business owners are trying to bounce back, but they're still struggling from the effects of the pandemic.
Are there things that the council could do, should do to help them get back on their feet and get into a better place, talking about small businesses? Yeah,
absolutely. And, it probably will be out of my hands by the time if I'm elected, but currently the current council, was given ARPA money from the federal government. And I know I just watched the meeting just currently, I think last week, and they were talking about how to give back to small business. And I think they allotted something like $2.5 million to try to help out small businesses that were affected by COVID.
Yeah. You talked in your campaign announcement, you mentioned a minute ago about being pro-life and the sanctuary city ordinance and how that was handled. So far, these laws have held up. Even though a lot of legal experts said initially that they probably would not. Who knows what's going to happen down the road, but what did you think of how that was handled by the council? Did it need to go to a public vote? What did you think about all of that, and even where it stands today?
Sure. So, abortion's always going to be a very sensitive topic, no matter what side of the issue you're on. But I think the job of our elected officials here are to represent their voters and represent the people. And the people had spoken. That is what they wanted. And so, there were lots of behind-the-door questions on what the legal aspect of what that was going to be, and would there be lawsuits. But I think ultimately, as a public servant and an elected official, you have to represent your people, and the people did not feel represented in that vote.
Interesting. Now, of course, one of the things that would be a big part of the next council would be that revamped road bond that seems to be sort of deadlocked in, should we do it this way, should we do it that way? The people didn't particularly care for the first go-around of all this and that vote. Is there a better way for that to be done, do you think? How does Broadway fit into that, or does it fit into that?
Yeah, so it absolutely fits into that. I think that's why the street bond election failed. It's unprecedented for a bond election in Lubbock, especially pertaining to streets, to fail. And they had done their research, and they had included all districts from the city, and so it was a good bond package. What people don't want is to spend $45 million to put bricks back down on Broadway. And if you've driven downtown, Broadway needs to be fixed. Nobody's under the illusion that we just ignore it. But I think there are cheaper ways to do it, all while maintaining kind of that historic aspect, maybe using the bricks to make some crosswalks, and like some other small town downtowns have done. I think it's going to be important, because we are falling behind on infrastructure with our streets, to get that back to a vote quickly. But we're going to have to see how we can revamp the downtown part of it before we can do that.
Sure. And before we go, you mentioned your husband was a Lubbock firefighter. There's forever been this sort of behind-the-scenes battle, I think, with the city for funding for the needs of fire rescue versus the funding for the needs of the police department, and sometimes that gets a little testy. How do you handle that if you're on the council, knowing that what you likely know about the needs of LFR? Would you be fair to the police department on the other end?
So absolutely. So being part of, and I don't say being part of the fire first responder family, being part of a first responder family is police and fire. We band together, even though there may be some testy little disputes behind the scenes, but they band together as first responders. And I think it is very important, to keep salaries of all of our first responders competitive with, cities in our state, to be able to recruit here and maintain good men and women on both of those departments too, so we can provide the best public safety to our citizens.
Dr. Jennifer Wilson is a candidate for the Lubbock City Council for District 5. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Brian.
Come back soon.
Absolutely.
And coming up here in conservative Texas, there are those who'd like to keep Texas money from flowing to New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, or Vegas, and build our own casinos. A closer look at both sides of that argument next on Talking Points.